If you have a Chevy Impala or any GM car with a 3.8 liter V6, this common leak is often mistaken for intake manifold gasket leak, which costs a lot of money to fix. And before you pull out your wallet, watch this 10-minute video that can save you a lot of money. If you have noticed your car is leaking red or green fluid towards the passenger side of the engine compartment, chances are your drive belt tensioner elbows are leaking. So if you are not ready to spare $7, $8+ hundred on a major repair, here is a simple solution that will cost you $25 total to buy some coolant and new tensioner elbows you can pick up at any local parts store. And the tools we're going to need are a 3/8 drive ratchet with a 10, 13, 15, and 19 millimeter sockets. You can also use wrenches of that size instead. 8 millimeter wrench to disconnect the battery. Lubricating compound like So-Glide. A metal brush, $1 at Harbor Freight. Some hook or a small screwdriver. This tool is my favorite out of the bundle. Torque wrench preferred but not necessary. And these are some extra tools I used to make my life easier. So let's begin. Open the radiator cap. Make sure the engine is cold before you do that. And disconnect the battery. Next, let's remove the engine cover by taking off the engine filler cap and neck. You can see it is two separate pieces. Pretty simple concept. Now pull up on the front of the cover and pull it forward towards yourself to slide this pin at the back out of the hole. Now on the driver's side, underneath, we can find the radiator drain. Just move the splash shield out of the way and you will find a 19 millimeter drain plug that looks like this. While the coolant is draining, let's go ahead and remove this cross member, or as manufacturer calls it, cross vehicle brace. It has two 13 millimeter nuts on each side. Remove the cross member, and next we're going to remove the coolant expansion reservoir. It has two 10 millimeter nuts holding it. Remove those. Pull the hose out of this retainer and slide the reservoir straight up. To disconnect the hose from the reservoir, you can use two flat-tipped screwdrivers that you would twist away from each other like this, and now you can take off the hose. By the way, don't forget to put the engine oil filler cap back in to make sure nothing falls into the engine. Next, we're going to remove the belt. It is always a good idea to record the belt routing, even if you don't know the names of the pulleys. Here is a picture for your reference. Alternator, power steering pump, tensioner, water pump, crankshaft pulley, and AC compressor. I moved this junction block out of the way to gain a better view for the camera, so needless to say, you don't have to do that. To remove the drive belt, we will need a 15 millimeter wrench or ratchet. You place it right here and turn it counterclockwise. If it is too hard to turn, you can use a second wrench like this to gain more leverage, or use a longer ratchet. Once you remove the belt, it is a good time to check it for cracks in case it needs replacing. Mine looks good. Now we're going to remove the alternator, and we will start with this bracket at the top. There is a 10 millimeter bolt right there. And a 15 millimeter nut on the alternator side. Remove that and the bracket is free. Next, loosen up the 3 bolts holding the alternator. 1, 2, and the third one is hiding right here. And that one does not need to be removed, just loosened. Now that all 3 bolts are loose, let's go ahead and remove the 2 in the front of the alternator. Don't lose this little spacer. You may have to wiggle the alternator a little bit to get them out. Slide the alternator forward to free it from the bolt, and you can place the alternator off to the side. And there's our elbows, 1 and 2. So the last piece we need to remove is this drive belt tensioner. It is held by 2 bolts right here and a 3rd bolt right here by the power steering pump reservoir. They take a 15mm socket. I'm going to break them all loose first and then remove them completely. If they are hard to turn by hand, you can use a socket. Also, try wiggling the whole assembly as you're pulling the bolts out. And now the whole tensioner assembly is loose, being held just by the 2 elbows. Don't be afraid to pull hard on it, because the elbows are getting replaced. Just be prepared for some coolant to spill when you get it out. And here is one more look at the 3 bolt holes. One right here, 2 right here, and this is where the alternator sits. Now let's go ahead and remove our elbows. If you compare the old ones with the new ones, you can see the new one is longer because part of the old one is broken off and needs to be removed from the tensioner and from the engine. And this is where our hooks and screwdrivers come in handy. So remove all the junk, clean all the surfaces with a metal brush, and wipe them down with a rag. This one actually didn't break, which makes it even easier. And the hardest one to get to is right here inside the lower intake manifold plenum. Again, clean it all out. Brush and wipe and get it ready for the new elbows. You want to make sure to put some lubricating compound on the O-rings of your new elbows so that you don't damage them when you slide everything in. I personally found it easier to put the elbows in the tensioner first and then align them with the engine side. Once both elbows are in, get the bolts started by hand one at a time, moving the tensioner assembly around to align the bolt holes. These tensioner bolts torque to 37 foot-pounds. If you have not cleaned the area, definitely don't forget to do that now. Brake cleaner works great for that. Blow some compressed air. It's okay if you don't have it, it just helps the brake cleaner dry up faster. And now we can install our alternator. Slide it under the back bolt and wiggle it to get the other 2 bolts started. These bolts torque to 37 foot-pounds as well. Next, put on your drive belt. Make sure it is aligned with all of the pulleys. power steering pump, tensioner, water pump, crankshaft pulley, and AC compressor. Don't forget the alternator bracket, the nut torques to 37 foot-pounds, and the bolt to 18 foot-pounds. Put the coolant expansion reservoir hose back on and clamp it down. Now at the bottom of the reservoir, you have a slot that is supposed to align with this cone-shaped piece bolted to the sidewall. Slide it down, and with a few taps, your reservoir is back in place. Two 10mm nuts, hose inside the retainer, install the cross brace, 18 foot-pounds torque on the nuts. Now let's get under the car and put the radiator drain plug back in. Don't over tighten it, it is plastic. Clean it up. Connect the battery. Install the engine cover. Put new coolant in and go test drive it. And look at it now, $25 later, and it is dry as a bone. If this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up, share your feedback and questions in the comments below. Good luck and take care.